Tonight, we are going to be joined by Ray McGovern. He is somebody who knows the machinery from the inside. He spent 27 years at the CIA, briefing presidents from Reagan to George H.W. Bush. He chaired the National Intelligence Estimates. He analyzed Soviet strategy during the Cold War. And he later became one of the intelligence community's fiercest whistleblowers. He returned his CIA medal in protest of torture and went on to co-found Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity to expose corruption from within. Now, Ray McGovern is joining us because the Durham Appendix has been declassified. And he says this is like a burst appendix. It is basically a festering, infected scandal that is finally rupturing in public view. This was a 29-page classified annex that was just declassified and released by Senator Chuck Grassley. It is the final piece of Special Counsel John Durham's years-long investigation into Russiagate. And it reads like a roadmap of political sabotage. The appendix confirms U.S. intelligence had credible warnings in 2016 that Hillary Clinton's campaign planned to falsely link Donald Trump to Russian interference with help from the media, the FBI, and possibly even foreign disinformation operatives connected to George Soros' network. It names Brennan and Comey and Clapper and shows they knew the Steele dossier was basically garbage, but they pushed forward with it anyway, and they ignored all of the evidence that could have cleared Trump, implicated Clinton, and whatnot. So Ray McGovern joins us. He says this is the closest we've come to exposing the deep state and the deep rot at the core of America's security. And the implications go all the way to Barack Obama. So tonight, one of the big questions we're going to be asking is, will there be any consequences for anyone? Ray McGovern joins us here in just a moment to break it all down here on The Kim Iversen Show. If you don't trust Big Pharma, you're not alone and you're not crazy. That's exactly why Children's Health Defense exists. Founded by RFK Jr., CHD is one of the few organizations fearless enough to take on the medical industrial complex. They expose the lies, they investigate the conflicts of interest, and they fight back through relentless legal action, independent research, and public advocacy. Whether it's vaccine safety, environmental toxins, or the expulsion of chronic illness in kids, CHD is asking the tough questions and demanding accountability. This isn't just a nonprofit, it's a movement. But they're up against trillion-dollar industries, captured government agencies, and a media machine that works overtime to silence them. And they don't take money from the very institutions they're exposing. Everything they do is funded by people like you, and now more than ever, they need your help. So if you believe in medical freedom, truth, and protecting children, now's the time to step up. Go to childrenshd.org, donate, and give what you can, because your donation helps fund lawsuits, research, and advocacy that challenge the system and demand real accountability. Every donation, big or small, fights for our kids, our rights, and our future. So once again, head to childrenshd.org/donate to donate and fight for medical freedom. Ray, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Most welcome, Kim.
Okay, let's talk about the burst appendix and Russiagate. How big of a deal? First of all, for those who haven't really been following the Russiagate, the latest in the Russiagate scandal, and I think the reason why a lot of people haven't been following it is because we're kind of fatigued on it, right? I mean, it was a big, huge thing for so long where the Democrats were saying Russia, 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 and Trump is basically a Manchurian candidate that Russia installed, and it ended up just being, a big nothing. And now it's like back, right? But it's back from the other, but it's a whole different angle, a whole different, now it's looking like the Democrats totally knew that the Russiagate thing was a hoax. But how important is that really?
Well, Kim, you asked the right question right off the bat. It's very important. This is consequential, okay? 80% of the Americans believe that Putin has horns, that the Russians hate us, that the Russians are a threat. And that is largely due to I use the word advisedly, brainwashing of Americans as a result of Russiagate. It goes 9 years now, and there's been no settling of this. Nobody's been held to account until now. So, back toward the end of Biden's tenure, we were close to nuclear war with the Russians. We were, I included, were really afraid. And now it looks like Trump is not, well, he may be a little brighter, but he's so mercurial and so unpredictable that the Russians have to be on high alert, in my view, to see what he might do. And how he might be enabled to do that is because most Americans have been brainwashed on RussiaGate, and that's consequential. Matter of fact, I had one radio host who used to have me on. And finally said, "I'm getting tired of you. Ray, you're a one act pony, for God's sake. You're RussiaGate, you know." This is when it was at its height. And he said, "Why do you do this?" And I said, "Well, okay. Why I do this is because Russia has nuclear weapons. That's why. Parse that. See if you can figure that out." I haven't been on the show since, but that's essentially why. You don't mess
Mhm.
around. You don't brainwash Americans so that they're willing to go to war with a
Right.
with a country that's not really threatening you.
But what is the significance now of discovering that Democrats set this whole thing up, that it was a hoax? And we'll get into all of exactly, what the latest discoveries are. But what, I think many of us with Russiagate, I mean, that's why we're calling it Russiagate, because it was like the scandal that they were, it was just, it was like a made up scandal. They held on to it forever. And they kept holding on to it when there was nothing to be found. And so I think most of us who followed it and rolled our eyes kind of think, okay, yeah, it was a hoax from the beginning. But now we're finding out with all of these document releases that they really knew it. They really didn't believe that Russia was. I mean, it might correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is they really didn't believe Russia was actually behind it. They just decided to go along with that narrative because, well, I mean, I think a good question is why? Why did they do that?
Well, they made it up out of whole cloth, as you say. Um, just in a general perspective, Kim, the reason it's so important now is that for the first time in my maturity, um, Tulsi Gabbard, head of the intelligence establishment, and the FBI, Kash Patel, have thrown down the gauntlet to the deep state and the major media that has been cooperating and enabling the deep state and the Democratic Party, which made all this stuff up. Now, why I say that is that's pretty consequential. The odds are against her. I mean, look at the New York Times. They've had two things already: poo-pooing and just distorting what the real evidence is. So even if you get real, concrete, documentary evidence, there's so much at stake for these people who won Pulitzer Prizes for their
Yeah.
reporting on Russiagate, that it's a real tough hold. So the gauntlet's been thrown down, and now there's another sense you could say gauntlet needs to be run by Tulsi between these deep state people, the media, and the Democrats, and they all have such deep interests to protect that it's going to be a real hard slog. The odds are against her. Now, for her, we have the publications of veteran intelligence professionals for sanity all through this thing, contemporaneous, picking apart this or that legend, this or that made up stuff that the that the Democrats did. Let me, before I forget it, let me mention the first one and the most important one. When Russian hacking of the DNC emails. What's the big deal there? Well, the DNC emails showed that Bernie Sanders didn't have a snowball's chance in hell to get the nomination. It was all stacked. W. Wasserman Schultz had to quit the next day, so they were really okay. So, so what we did, since we veteran intelligence professionals for sanity are blessed with all manner of people who really think that the truth is important and they're going to go out on a limb to defend it. Three senior members of NSA, the National Security Agency, the people that do the coding and the intercepting and all. Okay, two were former technical directors there, and one was a senior analyst. They came to us and said, "Can we join?" Sure. We don't even have a physical you have to pass. Sure, join. Now, what can we do for you? Oh my God, what you can do is look at all these charges about hacking and see if it makes any sense. And it didn't take them, well, it took them 2 weeks. December 12th, 2016, okay, even before Trump took office, we issued a memorandum saying, look, it's technically impossible that this was a hack by Russia or by anybody else. It was a copy onto a thumb drive from a computer, from somebody who had access to a DNC computer, and then put in a pocket, you give it to Julian Assange. That's what happened, and we can prove it. And we took pains not to, well, there was technical detail that was needed, and of course, Bill Binney and Ed Loomis, the two former technical directors, built the networks, built the systems that we're talking about. And we had the charts that that our friend Ed from Hong Kong, Ed, what's his name? I'm drawing a blank. Anyhow, the fellow who, the NSA or CIA type,
Oh,
Edward
Snowden.
Snowden,
Are you
of
talking
course,
about?
yeah, Edward Snowden.
Okay.
We had his charts, right? And that
Yeah.
helped. And
Yeah.
then also we had the principles of physics, okay? And the principles of physics indicated that you couldn't download something onto the internet at the speed with which you can download onto a thumb drive. Download is wrong, copy, okay? And so we had all, so we published that thing. Of course, nobody would take any cognizance of it, not even, the Trump people or anybody, because it was deemed to be too complicated. Okay, we bent over backwards to explain the difference between a hack and a copy or a leak, okay? But, so that was one of our first endeavors in this. But you asked actually how it all started. I'd be happy to start there as well, Kim, unless you.
Yeah, let's get into the latest evidence. What is it? What's the burst appendix that you're talking about? What's the latest information that we have, and what
Okay,
is it exposing?
yeah. Well, last month, Tulsi Gabbard released a couple of things. The most important was two things. One was the former House Intelligence Committee investigation of what happened. Now, who was one of the leaders of that committee investigation? Kash Patel, now head of the FBI. So he knows where all the bodies are buried, as they say in Washington. He knows where the bodies are not buried and still walking around free and guilty as hell. But he didn't know where the evidence was. Now,
Mhm.
guess where he found it? As soon as he came in to be FBI director, he started looking around to these special rooms that had been sealed off. And one room, he found a whole bunch of burn bags. Now, burn bags are sort of like paper bags, twice the size of a normal one, okay? And when you're finished with a classified document, you usually rip it up and put it in a burn bag, okay? And when it gets full up, you staple it closed and you put it down the burn bag chute. Except this information was so sensitive that they wouldn't even dare put it down the burn bag chute because somebody
Mm.
had said, oh, well, let's take a look at it. So they left it in this room. Kash Patel, long story short, is heir to this room, opens up these things, and among those documents he finds the classified appendix, the burst appendix, from John Durham's report. Now, John Durham was a special investigator, special counsel, and he spent 4 years, okay? But he's very, very particular about what he investigated. Now, he never asked to speak to Julian Assange,
Hmm.
who probably knew how he got that information. He never talked to a lot of people that he should have, and he sort of wiped himself away from what John Brennan, the head of the CIA, was doing. Anyhow, we have this appendix, and the appendix is available now to Kash Patel. And what does it say? Well, it says a lot of things. Um, it has information primarily from two Russian memoranda. Okay, now, uh, long story short, so people can understand, what happened was U.S. intelligence hacked or hacked into Russian email or Russian messages.
Hmm.
Would have been NSA or one of the other three-letter agencies, and found out that the Russians had been told, had been in turn hacking into communications between the Soros Foundation folks and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, head of the Democratic National Committee, and all kinds of other uh, think tank people who were sort of related to the Democrats. So what happened? Well, uh, they got this information, and it was very clear that on the 25th, 26th of July, just as the Democratic National Convention was starting, and 3 days after Julian Assange released those very damaging emails, it became clear that the Clinton administration had to deal with it. I mean, after all, a whole lot of Bernie Sanders supporters coming to the convention. My God, what's going to happen, right? So this very bright young woman named Julianne Smith says to Hillary, I know what we could do. We blame it on the Russians. And that way, we'll get a twofer. We hate WikiLeaks, we hate the Russians, and that will divert attention to what's in the emails.
Hmm.
And it worked like a charm, Kim. Worked like a charm. For the rest of the month, it was all, why did the Russians do this? Why did the Russians hack it? Oh, why did the Russians do this? Oh, they must be supporting Trump and all this kind of stuff. So that's how it started. And I have corroboration of that personally, okay? Uh, I used to go, when I lived in Washington, I used to go all these opportunities to go to Hillary Clinton's or John Podesta's think tank, so to speak. And anytime I had an inkling of what they're going to do. So this one time I'm there, and Jennifer Palmieri, who was Hillary Clinton's PR person,
Hmm.
was saying, "Oh my God, I tell you, the convention was amazing when we announced that the Russians had hacked into the DNC emails. I was told to go around and talk to the network and the cable people and tell them this. And it was really hard because they said what they couldn't believe it, but." When we got back to Brooklyn, Brooklyn was Hillary's headquarters, then all kinds of intelligence people and correspondents or journalists who have good intelligence ties starting to flesh this out, but it was still no good. An election was coming. Then, thank you, God. Okay. On October 7th, the head of national intelligence, James Clapper, and the head of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, issued a joint report asked for by Obama, saying, the Russians hacked and Russia, and then blah, 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 blah. Okay, up the kazoo, all right? Now, that was exactly 1 month before the election, and it was very clear because Jay Johnson and James Clapper were the two most malleable people. I mean, even more malleable than Brennan and Comey, okay? So when the president said, look, do it, they said, we don't have any forensics yet. CrowdStrike, the firm that the DNC hired, the FBI hired to do the forensic, they haven't reported yet. Do it anyway. So the story here is that Obama could not even get the CIA or the FBI in on this thing early enough 1 month before the election. So he went with the two most pliable people. And you hear Jennifer Palmieri say, oh, it was just what we needed. Then we were off and running, and we only had 1 month yet left to go, see? So then the rest of the thing kind of plays out. And you can see in this appendix that uh, that all kinds of stuff was hidden in the Durham report. Now, Durham has a checkered reputation, in my view. He was asked at one point to look into CIA torture, and he never really did. And this report that he came up with is very lacking in many respects. It's 4 years in the making, but it really didn't address some of these major things. For example, in the let's see, I printed this thing out. Yeah, In the appendix, there's some talk. I'll just quote it here. Barack Obama intended to scuttle any FBI investigation into Mrs. Clinton's mishandling of classified information. You remember that time, Kim, right? We all heard computer stuff. Yeah, okay. So, quote, it is replete with evidence that the Clinton campaign, with the help of special services, were hatching plots to falsely connect Trump to Russia. Well, now, Durham's people said, special services, wow. And Durham said, what's that mean? Well, it could mean CIA or FBI, or it could mean the Russians. Maybe it means the Russians. The Russians are going to help Hillary Clinton. So it's just, the other thing I want to point out here is that there was evidence right off the bat that, yeah, here it is, another part of the appendix. Quote, based on information from Wasserman Schultz, the DNC head, the FBI does not possess any kind of direct evidence against Clinton because of their timely deletion from the email servers. so here it is. The email servers, they had top secret code word information on them. Okay. So the direct evidence is missing because of their timely deletion from the email service. So that's how damaging it is. The bottom line here was that they concluded, or they pointed out, that this one woman, Julianne Smith, was the bright genius who said, Hillary, this is what we do. We blame it on the Russians. And she was thanked up and down. And guess where she landed up? Well, Joe Biden made her U.S. ambassador to NATO. So she's available for questioning. They're all available for questioning. And I hope that this thing proceeds in a deliberate way so that we get to the bottom of the stuff and we can see who's lying and who's telling the truth.
What would be the consequences? I mean, what should be the consequences for the people that fabricated this huge scam?
Well, I saw Devin Nunes, who was head of the House Intelligence Committee, on TV last night, and he pointed out that there is such a thing as the statute of limitations, but it doesn't apply to conspiracies. And actually, there's some testimony by Comey, by Brennan, and by Clapper that is within that five-year bracket there where they could be prosecuted. They lied through their teeth to Congress, among other places. And as I say, lying to Congress, well, that's a felony, right?
Yeah. But
Clapper did that. And then he said, well, sorry, I misspoke, When he was asked whether the NSA was monitoring everyone's conversations, and not deliberately or not intentionally, and of course he was lying through his teeth. Now he wrote a little letter to the committee, and they said, "Oh, that's okay, you could stay." And he stayed on as director of national intelligence for several years more.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversenShow.com. See you there.